So, traditional Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. To understand atheist and agnostic as well as many.
It's been a long time.
It has been a while since we've recorded.
Yeah, we're going to be rusty.
We don't have to be rusty, but we are changing up our release schedule at the beginning of season 6 of The Holy Watermelon.
Wow. Pretty exciting. So, we have a whole year of great content planned.
We're going to start off this year with the mystical Abrahamic traditions.
Yeah, on
The Holy Watermelon Podcast.
We had talked about Christianity for a while there, and it was great. We had some great content. But we're going back and talking about Kabbalah. I've heard it pronounced a few ways. I'll let our Hebrew guy.
I feel like the most common pronunciation in English, or at least that I've run against, is Kabbalah. But yes, there are different ways to pronounce this word, and it's fine. If you want to argue about it, the reality is that there's no good defense for pronouncing it as Jewish either.
Right, because they don't use vowels.
Well, the written vowels are a tricky thing, and the J that we use in English is not a feature of the Hebrew language.
Jewish? Like Yeshua?
I
Jacob?
guess. I mean, it's hard to argue in favor of that, too.
Okay, I mean, that's fair. Let's stick with Jewish.
It's easy, it's familiar. We've been doing it for hundreds of years.
Yeah. We don't need to embarrass ourselves.
We want to talk about Kabbalah. Depending on who you talk to, Kabbalah is a lot of things that don't get discussed when scholars talk about Kabbalah. Because Kabbalah is one specific mystic tradition, not all Jewish mystic traditions.
That's an important. It is, I'd say, the most well-known thanks to the 2000s and celebrities.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about later. Time. It was a really weird time. Yeah. We'll get there. We're going to start with the history, but.
Yeah. So Kabbalah is a Jewish mystical discipline focused on understanding the universe and its creator. So for centuries, the mysteries were exclusive to Jewish men over 40. No women, no Gentiles, no young people. Just Jewish men over 40 who had shown incredible discipline in their religious devotion. They were taken off to the side after Shabbat at some point and said, "Hey, you want to know more?"
Secret. I've got a secret. It's been a long time since I've got to sing that, but that's basically what this is. So,
yeah. So Kabbalah is, the word Kabbalah means reception, more or less. Some people will say it translates to tradition. Usually Masorah is the word we equate with tradition. So I prefer reception. And basically this means that it is a tradition that was historically offered to those men who would carefully and faithfully receive it. And such a receiver is called a mekubal. So since that word is generally agreed to mean receiver, Kabbalah should translate as reception.
All right, I'm into it. From mystical works, scholars identified several distinct mystical schools, including the Heckelot mystics, German pietists.
Pietists.
You know, I always struggle with that one.
I mean, some people do prefer piety over piety, but I don't.
All right. German pietists, the ecstatic school of Abraham Abulafia, Hasidism, and Zoharic Kabbalah.
We've talked a little bit about Hasidic Jews.
In passing.
Yeah, but they haven't been the focus of a thing yet. We'll see where that goes.
If you like this episode, we're happy to talk about Hasidic Judaism as well. I think I talked about the memoir Unorthodox on social media.
I feel like you've talked about it in the show before. In
the show as well. So yeah, I'd happily jump into that. Anyway, these schools can be subdivided further by individual masters and their disciplines. For example, the Kabbalah of Isaac Luria. And we know from Hasidism that there's also other rabbis that people follow under there as well.
Yeah. It's It's almost as diverse as Christianity was, let's say, 200 years ago. Christianity has gotten really wild.
Yeah, but we said we wouldn't talk about those Christians this episode.
Right.
But it's an important point nonetheless. Any form of Jewish mysticism is often referred to as Kabbalah, but the name Kabbalah is properly specific to the Zoharic tradition originating in southwestern Europe only about 750 years ago.
Yeah. The history there was just wild to read. There's a lot of ideas that are Jewish mysticism that date back thousands of years. And they always culminate in some new guy coming up with some big new thing. It's almost always a guy.
In this religion, it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But really, the core of mysticism is that it's not enough to know about God. A mystic is driven to experience God. And there are different ideas on what that can mean.
Yes, but it is actually very interesting where ideas converge.
Oh, yeah.
Once I started reading about the practices, like how you actually practice Kabbalah, it all starts to sound like Hinduism or Buddhism or...
Yeah, the Dharmic faiths are definitely manifest in this mystic tradition.
Absolutely. It's funny when things come full circle.
I don't know if it's like an evolution that brings them in a way that starts looking like something else, or if it's just, hey, we ran across this group and we like what they were saying.
I think it's there's a name for it, but when like liberals get so liberal, eventually they become conservative, and vice versa, where conservatives get so conservative.
The horseshoe effect?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden you're like, you've actually crossed the line to the other way around.
It's always more than two-dimensional is the trick.
That's fair.
But yeah, it happens.
That's an oversimplification, you're right. Mystics believe that understanding the mysterious processes of God is possible, and through that knowledge, a person can become truly intimate with God.
Which can mean a lot of different things depending on who you talk to. For some people, it does sound pretty sexual. For most, no.
Oh, that's disappointing.
I mean,
that's
your pursuit can be whatever you want your pursuit to be.
That's where like the Gnostics and I think even the Rosicrucians get a bit of a bad rap, is that people like focus on the people who make it sexual.
Yeah. Well, because if you want to make a group look weird, focus on the weirdest people in that group.
So of like the two of us, it's me.
It depends on who we're talking
I
to.
guess that's fair.
For some people, I'm the weirder of us. But for some, maybe you are the weirder.
Right. Most Kabbalists believe in a pantheistic or a panentheistic theology. Everything is part of God.
Yeah. The difference between those two things is that in panentheism, God is more than the universe. Pantheism is just the universe is God.
It's not polytheistic, though. That was one that I read. That is definitely not a polytheistic.
Yeah. The Kabbalah tradition is, like the rest of Judaism, very not okay with polytheism.
I also think some Jewish Kabbalists would disagree with the pantheistic or panentheistic.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
But it definitely is once we get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah. For a lot of people, Judaism is strictly monotheistic. History shows us that detail is only true about 2,700 years of their history. Before that, they were henotheistic or polytheistic, depending on who you talk to. Theism is a very tricky thing.
No. We've only talked about this for 6 years.
Right. Yeah. So, depending on who you talk to, you will get differing answers. Nothing is monolithic anyway.
Fair. There are 3 ways to obtain mystical knowledge. One is interpreting text to find hidden meanings, receiving direct revelation by some means not otherwise rationalized.
Yeah, we could be talking angelic visitations, spiritual possession.
Ayahuasca.
Good times.
Yeah. And number 3 is transmission terminating in one of the previously mentioned methods received from a teacher.
Pretty basic stuff, really.
Yeah. Someone telling you secrets.
Right. It's the easiest way to experience mysticism is just
Have
go to
someone tell you
class.
about it? Oh.
Just, tune into the podcast and listen.
Oh. I mean, there would be weird podcasts like that out there, so
Oh, for sure.
enjoy.
And I mean, the way that we list our show, we are competing with a lot of them,
Yeah. So don't listen to them too long.
right? Unless you're really into it.
Yeah.
I mean, you do you. We're not going to tell you not absorb information. That would be contrary to our mission.
That is true.
So, Jewish mysticism, in the way that's easy to recognize, dates back to nearly 2,000 years. Merkava mystics were focused on obtaining prophetic visions that would help them understand the very confusing and mystifying visions of heaven described in the prophetic book of Ezekiel. When you see these memes that are all over the place of biblically accurate angels, we're talking about Ezekiel.
Yeah.
The things he described are really perplexing.
Was he on ayahuasca?
It's hard to say what he was experiencing.
But something.
We do have evidence now that cannabis was used in the temple, and most of the prophets describe their experiences as being attached to a temple experience. I'm not aware of cannabis being
That good?
hallucinogenic.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not that good.
I mean, we've only recently learned that was definitely for sure part of the formula being used in the censers of the temple. It's very likely that there was something else that added to that experience.
Could you imagine the giggling?
Yeah, maybe. That'd be a good time.
And yeah, we did a whole episode on angels last spring. If you want to go back and listen to that episode, you should.
Yeah, for sure. The Zohar is the number one text of the Kabbalah tradition. There's some serious contention on the nature of this book. For a lot of people, it's paired with the Torah in importance.
I've read that, yeah.
Kind of a big deal. Because it's the number one book of the Kabbalah tradition. It shouldn't outrank the Torah if you're a Jewish faithful.
First, and
the Torah should be number one. Like, even the prophets later don't match the Torah in importance. But the Zohar, which is a word that means splendor, this splendid revelation, it's hugely important. And I mean, it's a commentary on the Torah, and it explains all these funky things that don't pop out at you automatically when you read the Torah. But if somebody explains it to you, maybe it's like, oh yeah, I can buy that sort of thing. It's purported to originate in the 2nd century CE. So like way back at the beginning of what we consider mystical Jewish thought, apart from the confusing revelation of Ezekiel.
we don't worry about him. He was high.
And all of this is attributed to this rabbi named Shimon Bar Yochai. But unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of evidence that we can connect the Zohar to good old Simon.
So yeah, everything I read was from Moshe Ben Shem Tov de Leon.
That was
very white and Canadian pronunciation.
Sure.
De Leon.
Yeah, for sure. The book was published by a Spanish rabbi named Moshe Ben Shem Tov de Leon.
Okay. Fine.
The kingdom of Leon being northern Spain kind of business.
Moshe Ben Shem Tov de Leon. That's what I said.
So he published this book about 1285 CE. And not like went to the publisher and put it all in the bookstores everywhere, but made it available to the people who he would have come to him to study mysticism. And it got very popular very quick as a new way to connect with God in a world that's struggling with all kinds of great and terrible things. The opportunity to take something that people have been talking about for a little while and write a book on it, make it sound way older, not the ideas, but like the full content of the book itself, is a thing we keep seeing happen.
Yep, lots of people like that trick.
Well, there's this weird thing that for some people, most people even, only old ideas are good ideas.
That is the worst idea.
Right? There's just this authority that an old idea gets to carry. But that's different than it being a good idea.
Absolutely. But you're not wrong. And I hate that.
It's frustrating.
It is frustrating. I'm trying to think of other good examples of things that we bleaching.
We still do that.
Where? Why?
Every now and then, somebody's like,
My
yeah,
blood's
bleaches.
bad.
Moses de Leon published, honestly, a whole bunch of books, all claiming that these were somebody else's writings from way back when. But he could now sell all these books that he could just come up with content and say, oh yeah, and so way back when said it, and that helped it sell. It was great. Really good business plan.
Yeah, and he's gonna have a copycat in 700 years.
There have been so many copycats, and he's not the first to do this, but he did do a really good job making money off of it.
He won't be the last.
For sure. The Zohar in particular is interesting that it's a mishmash of language.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is for sure quoting from a bunch of texts and various sources. It's hard to say for sure that he's quoting another person in bringing them together, or if it's just his own work mashing them together. But we've got a bunch of Aramaic dialects and medieval Hebrew slammed together in northern Spain in the medieval ages.
So what do Kabbalists actually believe? What is the secret?
Not as monolithic as you want it to be, but there are a lot of general statements that we can make. Metaphysical studies are huge. Everything that we talked about in the occult, Kabbalists are interested in. Everything that we talked about in our astrology episode a little while back, Kabbalists are interested in. We did a whole episode on astrology. You should definitely go back and listen to that. Considering how often we reference a fucus, that's a must listen to.
Where was I the other day? Someone was like, oh, my daughter's a Taurus, and I almost wanted to be like, oh yeah, and I'm an Ophiuchus, just to see. I'm not an Ophiuchus.
Right. But if you're dealing with somebody you're not going to have to deal with again,
They don't
you
need
can
to
lie
know.
about your birthday. That's
Right?
fine.
I should know what the birthday range for Ophiuchus is at least before I
That's fair.
make that
I feel
line.
like it's
November.
November.
November-ish, yeah. But yeah, anytime I see Zodiac, I was at I think I said this on air already. I was at a store and there was necklaces and there was 12. And I said, oh, Ophiuchus is missing. And the lady at the counter was like, excuse me. And I was like, Ophiuchus, the 13th zodiac sign. She's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, the stars have moved in 3,000 years. So there's actually a 13th sign. And it's Ophiuchus. And she's like, I had no idea. I was like, oh, but you're selling.
For the time I've spent in retail, if somebody wants to come to me and lecture me about the stuff that my store is selling, I just say, I'm sorry, I'm not in a position of authority. I make minimum wage. Go away.
You could tell she was someone who believed in the zodiac.
She shouldn't have been that surprised then.
I know. Anyway.
So according to Kabbalah, God cannot be understood. We've dealt with this before, and it shows up a lot, especially in monotheistic faith. And it's frustrating, naturally. So there is this mission that drives mystical thought to find ways to understand God. So God cannot be understood except as he is revealed in 10 mystical sefirot.
Sefirot.
Which are attached to the 10 acts of creation described mystically, hidden in the Torah text.
In numbers. Maybe.
No, this will be a Genesis business.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. As great as the name Numbers is for a biblical book in the Torah, important to people who are into numerology. The Book of Numbers is a little weak on value there.
All right.
Yeah. Oh well. So if somebody masters all of the right things, healing and putting good out into the world is a good example that I think most people can get on board with. They will allegedly become co-creators with God, influencing the world around them. Overall, I'd say good goal. Putting good out into the world to make it a better place is something more people should be doing.
Yeah. Kabbalah has this concept of Ein Sof, very German from the spelling. And it's described in the Zohar as, this is directly from the Zohar, before he gave any shape to the world, before he produced any form, he was alone without form and without resemblance to anything else. Who then can comprehend how he was before the creation? Hence it is forbidden to lend him any form or similitude, to call him by his sacred name, or to indicate him by a single letter or a single point. But after he created the form of the heavenly man, he used him as a chariot, wherein to descend, and he wishes to be called after his form, which is the sacred name, Yahuwah.
Yeah, I almost made that sound like a sneeze.
Yahuwah. So it has a few definitions. It's been translated as infinity, unendingness, infinite light, or the nameless being. I'm processing it as like this mix of panentheism and chaos, the time before time that we talked about some time ago.
The years blur together.
They
after
really,
a while.
after over 100 episodes, I'm like, I remember we did Chaos Monsters, but we did Chaos Monsters.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what your take on that is of this Ein Sof.
I understand why it's easy to make this particular claim about God of he's unknowable, don't even try. Is kind of the angle that this is pushing, which is a little contrary to this goal of experiencing God. And that's annoying to me.
It is, but I had just before Christmas read God by Reza Aslan, and
Good book.
You've read God by Reza Aslan, and all of our listeners should read God by Reza Aslan. And he sort of talks about how like we're always creating and recreating God in our image, or basically to suit our needs. So I kind of appreciate the humility of going, we'll never know. Instead of going, I think he's a white man because I am a white man.
Sure.
But I also understand what you're saying. Like, I want to know God, but he's unknowable, so that's futile.
Yeah.
Ein Sof is important as a concept because it is the emanator of the 10 sefirot.
Which is such a complex idea.
The 10 sefirot do not exist without the Ein Sof.
Right.
And that's really important. I made a little note on it, but basically the importance of that is that scholars or rabbis, if they exist without the Ein Sof, then you're getting into like polytheism, or like you don't actually need a deity to do. Right. So they're very clear that it doesn't exist without the other.
Must be connected to this God.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can't have any of this Hinduism creeping in. Only the Abrahamic God.
Well, and one of the funny things about that is that a lot of these ideas are really popular with Unitarians and Theosophists. And so a lot of symbolism is shared between a lot of groups. And for some Kabbalists, this is totally fine. Others, not so much. It's tricky.
Yeah.
But the tree of life is the diagram for these 10 Sefirot. Or 11.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, because when I think of the tree of life, I think of the circle one.
Okay.
That's more like Celtic. So we'll put a tree of life diagram. We'll probably put 2 tree of life diagrams in the Discord. There's 2. Keter and Dat are considered 1 Sefirot, representing the same force, just in different dimensions. But we'll break all 10 of these down for you. If you're listening on your phone, pull it up on our Discord preferably, but in a pinch Google.
Yeah, if you want to just pull up anybody's picture,
Yeah.
you can do that.
But preferably, you'll hop onto our Discord.
But yeah, we do try to curate useful content for you.
Yeah, so we'll throw this in maybe the latest episode or the Jewish channel.
Or
both.
all of them.
All the-
Every single channel.
Every channel. And then we're going to tag you all in it so you get like 7. No, I'm kidding. I won't because then you'll leave our Discord. I digress. Take it away, Preston.
So the first is Keter or something.
Keter.
I don't know if Keter is right. I feel like Keter is probably better, but probably still not right.
All right, well.
My Hebrew was never good. I did do Hebrew in university. I feel like I mentioned this before. I could have done better, I'm sure, if I tried harder. Hebrew's hard.
Is that on Duolingo? I think Yiddish is.
I'm sure it is.
I think Yiddish is for sure, but I don't know if Hebrew is. Anyway,
Okay.
you should get back on it.
So Keter is divine will, the initial force toward the creation of the infinite source, which we just said before, Ein Sof. It represents a transcendent consciousness, often called the hidden light. Not just God, but it's beyond even that.
It's this infinity, unending, yeah.
Yeah. It is found at the top of the tree of life, with the next 3 sefirot coming from it.
So branching off.
Yeah.
So number 2 is Chokmah. Chokmah?
Chokmah.
Chokmah means wisdom, and it represents our conscious intellect. It's the wisdom coming to us from the nothingness. Figure that one out. Keter being the nothingness.
Right. It's tricky business. The third is Bina. It means understanding. This Sefirot develops and shapes the wisdom that is received from Chokmah into tangible forms.
Dot.
Which we said was the same as Keter.
It's the bonus one.
Right.
And it is placed where all of the Sefirot meet.
So like the center of the tree of life.
The very center of the tree of life. And it is called the palace of infinite sharing. So when all these things are happening together. So again, it's kind of like everything, which is what Keter is. Everything into infinity. But I don't even want to say more tangible, but like how?
More tangible than everything, less tangible than nothing.
Yeah.
Which is a confusing paradox.
Yes. Yeah, when you look at the tree of life, it's like vertical. So it's like a look closer to humanity. Still not on the human plane, but it's closer to humanity. So,
as you can tell at this point in the episode, we are not masters of Kabbalah studies.
No, we're not. But if you are a master in Kabbalah studies, give us a show.
We would love to have you on the show.
We'll have an interview. Tell us more.
All right, 4th on our list, or 5th if you want to count.
No, well, they still counted as 4.
Right, they're numbered.
Yes,
but now we're past the bonus, which screws the numbering.
Right, but still call it 4 because
Yes.
they would say this is the 4th Sefirot.
Yes, they are pretty firmly numbered.
Yes, so we are technically on 5, but it is the 4th.
We like numbered lists.
Yeah.
This one complicates it a little bit.
You know what? If you could have 14 Ten Commandments, you can have 11 Sephirots.
Right? So the 4th is Chesed, which means kindness or love. Specifically, a devotional love of God and God's love and mercy towards his people, rather than interpersonal love of any sort of variety. So it is the first emotive attribute of the Sefirot.
Then number 5 is the Gevurah. It's the second of these emotional Sefirot, and it is the essence of judgment and limitation. So this Hesed, Gevurah, and the next one, Tiferet, are all on the same plane, and they're kind of, emotionally driven.
So number 6 is Tiferet, meaning glory, adornment, or beauty. The Sefirot combines kindness and judgment, which is why it's placed in the middle of the tree of life, between those two in the diagram. Not the center of the tree, but middle between these other two. Kindness and judgment must be in balance and cannot exist without the other.
I think that's interesting.
It is very
This is when I
interesting.
started to understand the form of the tree of life. So
Yeah.
hopefully you're following along with
Yeah,
us.
there's balance between this virtue and this virtue, or, well, virtue is not the right word, but in this particular set that we just talked about, they'd be virtues.
And where they come from above, it still starts to puzzle together. Number 7 is netzah, and it means everlastingness, perpetuity. Perpetuity.
Like perpetual.
I know, and I don't know. I can't say it. Perpetualness. Eternity or endurance. It symbolizes motivation, leadership, and following through with one's commitments. Which is opposite.
Hod, which refers to humility or submission. It is the opposite of netzach, and therefore across from it on the tree of life. It's almost like if you're really carefully listening and not paying attention to anything else you're doing, you could imagine it from our description.
I would love someone to not look at it and draw it from our description. And then...
I don't know if we started off well enough for that,
but
we'll see.
They're just going to have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And number 10, the last, or number 11 if you're counting the bonus, but it is the 10th sefirot.
I feel like we skipped 9.
Yesod. Oh, we did. Sorry. Number 9. Apologies. Is Yesod. It's the foundation of the world as built by God. It is the transmitter of the sefirot between worlds. So now we're going from this, I guess, like celestial to terrestrial.
Yeah. So we have the earth, and then on that earth, but also below it on the tree for illustrative purposes, because it must come later, must be derived from everything above it, is Malkuth, which means kingdom, which is, like I said, very bottom of the tree of life, and it represents the physical world that we live in, reality and matter, different than the foundation of the world, but it is the foundation of our life in that world, I guess.
That's a good way to describe it.
It is the furthest from the divine, but the divine does come to it through the channels of the other sefirot.
So this is a great foundation because you can see how someone could build a practice of like, what does it mean to be humble, or what does it mean to endure? And then you start building your way to enlightenment.
Yeah.
I can see
and these
how
are
this
pretty
is
reasonable steps of making yourself a better person as you contemplate these things.
right. Kindness, judgment must be, maybe judgment's a bit of a strong word, but I think of like honesty and tactfulness.
Yeah.
I have to balance out kindness.
You can't operate functionally in this life without discerning what's good and what's bad.
And then you
for
realize
you and the
when you're doing
you.
all these things, you'll become wiser.
Yeah.
And on and on and on. And
you seek to bring beauty to the world. These are good things.
Yeah, but it's like, and again, the tree of life is a good foundation, and I love the numbered list on a very broad overview of Kabbalah practice and belief.
Yeah. So in the Kabbalah tradition, evil is a thing that gets talked about, as most religions have some sort of explanation. Why is there evil in the world? Because there is evil in the world, and there's this panentheistic cosmology, evil must necessarily be a quality of the deity. Not that God is evil, but that there is evil in God. You have this God that naturally includes everything, that he creates within himself, but also makes space away from himself for the universe. It's kind of a weird creation, and it's tricky to get your head around.
It is.
But in all of that, there is evil, but it's all in God. So obviously there's evil in God.
I guess, again, I said I wanted to avoid the Christians, but like, and I guess probably a bit in Judaism where like God made you, right? That's clearly a belief. I won't get into whatever.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of religions that say that we are exactly how God created us.
Yeah, you were made exactly how God intended you to be. There's a lot of evil people on the planet.
Yep.
So either God made evil people, or you have some sort of
flaw,
autonomy.
Yeah.
Right? So either God made you the way you wanted to be and you are evil, or God didn't make you, or didn't make you, or there's wiggle room for maybe God made you one way, but you have autonomy to be bad.
Right.
So I think in panentheism, that idea of God made you the way you're supposed to be is probably a good belief to pair with it. I'm not saying that's the case in Kabbalah, but that would be a good way to justify it. Like, that's just the little evil piece of God. Hitler. Elder Price.
It's all complicated. Kabbalah tradition also teaches about reincarnation, that if you're not going to finish everything that you need to accomplish in this life, you get another kick at the can. And it's also nifty that it divides the soul into 3 elements that I didn't even bother writing down the Hebrew names for it, but it's basically the equivalent to the id, ego, and superego. That there is an animal part of your soul that is tied to the fact that you have a body, that you have physical needs. There is your ego that is the core of yourself, your human identity that makes it possible for you to interact with anything that is greater than yourself. And then the superego that really connects you with the divine and makes it possible to convey forward in this path. It's kind of nifty that it's, basically just id, ego, and superego mapped out long before. Was it Freud that?
I think, Freud
Yeah.
was the big ego guy.
Yeah. And then, contrary to all of this, medieval rabbinical Judaism was generally opposed to the doctrine of reincarnation. Some people say, yep, no, you die and that's it. Not really all that popular. A lot more people are happy to say, oh yeah, no, there's definitely a heaven, and not necessarily matching up exactly what the Christians taught, but that there is this bosom of Abraham to be received into kind of business. So reincarnation is actually really important to Hasidic Judaism and Lurianic Kabbalah.
So how does one practice Kabbalah, and how is it different than, I don't say being a regular Jew? That's pretty broad strokes. But I guess, what are the additional or differences? I found this one really interesting.
Yeah, tell me
I
more.
might just jump in.
Jump in.
Even though I asked the question, it is now rhetorical. Meditation and prayer. So the Zohar teaches meditative practices to help practitioners achieve a higher consciousness. Within the meditation practice, there's also the practice of chanting. And this typically looks like an unstructured prayer said aloud in Hebrew. One article I read, and I didn't put it in here because I didn't really know how to phrase it, but said the untraditional religious practices of meditation and chanting. And I was like, sir, maybe untraditional to Judaism, but not untraditional religious practices.
Yeah.
That's about as traditional, that's as base as a religious practice gets, is mindfulness and saying things aloud.
It is the Thanksgiving of religious practice.
So
Thanksgiving is like the most universal religious holiday.
Yeah. So I wanted to say that because I wanted to talk about this, because I was like, that's the funniest sentence I've ever read.
Mm-hmm.
Rav Aryeh Kaplan says in his book Meditation and the Kabbalah, and in his book Meditation and Kabbalah, that meditation is meant to bring spiritual liberation and eventually achieve enlightenment. So this is where, I said earlier in the episode, this full circle, like back to the Dharmic religions, makes me giggle a little bit.
It's okay to admit that you saw something you liked somewhere else and you wanted to adopt it, rather than pretending that you're reinventing it within your tradition. Just say, yeah, no, this thing seems to be good, seems to do what I want it to do, so I'm doing it. Oh well. And then numerology. Numerology is a thing that I've complained a lot about over the years, that it's dangerous to read into a text an idea that was not there when it was written. And Greek and Hebrew, and probably loads of other alphabets, their whole mathematical system didn't have numbers the way you want them to have numbers. They just used their letters with values based on their position in the alphabet that they had already agreed upon. Thankfully, they already had an ordered alphabet. That was a very important part of human development. So the letters did have numeric values, but ascribing moral values to these numbers and letters is not something that I've ever been able to buy into. Though if somebody were to write a whole text and consistently preserve those symbols in the letters and numbers throughout the whole text, that would be impressive.
I was going to say, that feels nearly impossible.
It does.
To get both your, I was going to say your written point across, but numbers are also written, but your point across via words and letters, and then also have your point, the same point be made, or even a secret point be made with numbers, feels really hard.
It's a Herculean task.
I saw a reel of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I forget who he was being interviewed by. But the interviewer asked, "Did you ever lie when you were in office?"
As governor? Oh, yeah.
And he said he did. Well, he might have lied more than once, but this was the one time he admitted to it. Made me giggle. And so he had to like sign some, I don't know if it was a law or whatever. He had to sign something he wasn't happy about having to sign off on. He was working with a guy he didn't like working with. And so he wrote this letter out and signed it. And the first letter of every sentence spelled out "fuck you." And someone on the internet was like, the first letter of every sentence spells "fuck you." And so someone asked me, like, "Did you know this?" He said, "No." He absolutely didn't. That was his lie, was the no. And even that feels like a lot of work to make sure that your line breaks work. Because if you have a really short line, they're going to know you did it on purpose.
Right.
And then to have the right word picked, even that feels like a lot of work. And that's only 7 sentences. 7
Or 7 lines of text, yeah. Poetry is more work than a lot of people give it credit for. And writing a coded message is altogether something extra.
You can find gematria calculators online.
That's convenient.
It is. So I popped the one I found was like, write in any word you want. And so it was like, I don't know, Moses, devil. And then it said 666. And I was like, that's not a word. What magic, what numbers are you for 666? Like, it is a number.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that one made me giggle. Anyway, so I put in my name and I put in Preston's name. I'm 125 and Preston is 425. Does 425 mean anything to you, Preston?
Nothing at all.
Oh.
How about 125?
Literally, I can't think of anything.
I see Christmas in 125.
12,
25, but the 2's overlap.
So am I Jesus?
No, you just love Christmas.
Yeah, like there's nothing significant for me in December or January if you're doing 125 or 12/5.
Right.
7's my favorite number. The total of those numbers is 8. Yeah, I literally can't think of anything that would. Maybe there's 125 KDs out there.
I feel like that's a pretty conservative estimate. I'm just reminded of this ridiculous comic that I see every couple of years. It makes its rounds. Girl goes back in time and finds herself in ancient Rome. And particularly that point in history when everybody after the second kid is just numbered.
Right.
Rather than given a proper name of their own. Like Septimus is the 7th child. And so Guard introduces himself, and then Liv introduces herself as Liv. And you see the guard counting his fingers.
What is that, 54?
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
Like, that's so many.
Yeah. Regular Duggar there.
Right. I think it's really interesting. I talked about the numbers of Hebrew and Greek alphabets. And the Romans did something similar, but only like a handful of the letters have numeric values, and all the rest are, don't worry about it.
Well, there you go.
A lazy numerology for the Romans.
I like it. So we talked a little bit at the beginning of the episode about celebrities and Kabbalah today and how it got really popular for a while there. So, and with that, a lot of misconceptions. Like it kind of got weird for a while.
Oh yeah.
We're millennials, so we distinctly remember. If you're Gen Z, you have no idea what we're talking about. But
Yeah. No, this was the thing that was in the tabloids in that sweet spot when I was in high school and actually reading them.
yeah, and it was just like, who's the Kabbalist now? Was it was everywhere.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about how that happened and some hot takes and common questions that we found. So in 1971, a relatively poor Jewish couple, Philip and Karen Berg, decided that they would open a Kabbalah center where they could teach anybody and everybody about the Kabbalah, including, for the first time, women and non-Jewish people. So a very secular approach to Kabbalah.
Yeah, opening it up to women was controversial. Opening it up to Gentiles was a
Disgusting.
big problem for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And lucky for them, the Kabbalah Center got hugely popular very, very quickly. And people were just happy to spread the word.
So the timing was good for Philip and Karen because we see this. This is the whole New Age movement. This is the 70s, right? This is when
counterculture.
This is when Hinduism and Buddhism is coming, and New Age and all of that is coming to North America. So mystical Judaism is pretty cool too.
Yeah.
At this time, so good timing on their part.
Yeah. So a lot of Christians showed up to these Kabbalah centers to learn stuff, but Christian Kabbalah has also been its own thing for centuries as well. Just spinning the Jesus flavor into the Jewish lore of Kabbalah, and then maybe coming up with a few of their own ideas. Won't get too much deeper into that. Maybe that'll be next episode.
Yeah. So along with that, and we'll get into the celebrity of it. These were questions I found online a lot. One that came up a lot was, can you study Kabbalah without being a Jew?
Turns out you can.
Well, I mean, I was like, this feels like a really dumb question because anybody can study anything without being anything.
Yeah. Studying
something does not mean you are.
Right.
I don't know if you know this. I'm an atheist.
What? I have learned a little bit about fish and penguins. I am neither.
What? But yeah, if you're just like doing a scholarly study or internet search, you're fine.
Yeah.
The elders of the internet are not going to come and get you if you're not.
Oh, you got to watch out for the elders of the internet.
The elders of the internet know who I am. One question I loved, and all the answers I saw contradicted what I'm about to say, but is Kabbalah the occult?
Of course it is.
Hell yeah. If you Google that question, Jewish websites will say no. But this is because of the negative connotations of the word occult and a complete misunderstanding of what occult is.
Yeah.
What does occult mean, and how does it apply to Kabbalah?
If it is secret or hidden knowledge, it is occult. And thus, Kabbalah cannot be anything else.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just thinking, there's nothing more hidden than mystic branches of religion.
Right? It's like, was it Thich Nhat Hanh a little while ago said that Buddhism is not a religion. We talked about this in our Buddhism episode. And then it was Dr. Glenn Farron posted a commentary on that assertion just a little while ago. And the idea behind the whole thing is that when you say that it's not a thing that it obviously is, it's really obvious that you're just trying to avoid the negative connotations that go with that word and trying to still get people to buy into your thing.
Absolutely. And that's, I bet Glenn put it more eloquently than
He
that.
did.
But
100%. Don't make him look bad because of what I said.
But I remember having this conversation with a girlfriend who's Christian, and we had another mutual friend who said she was not going to call herself Christian anymore because of the negative connotations.
Yeah.
Persecution complex, whatever.
Yeah.
So she was only going to call herself a Christ follower.
Okay.
And I was like, but that doesn't solve the problem of the bad Christians.
Right.
And I think a cult definitely gets a bad rap because people don't know what it is. And even when we first did our cult episode years ago, we were both kind of like, what actually is a cult? And now we've got a better understanding. So a cult does not equal bad or evil, just hidden.
Yeah. There's no moral judgment on the word occult from a reasonable human being.
Yeah, I mean, we've sort of said it's synonymous with pseudoscience. Metaphysics falls under that. So whether that's tarot or essential oils, they're a cult. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Therefore, Kabbalah is a cult. We're using numerology, a cult. So, what was with this Madonna's red string bracelet thing in the 2000s?
Yeah, that was all over the place. I think
Everywhere.
that's where I first heard about Kabbalah was Madonna wearing the bracelet.
And I found a picture of Demi Moore when she was still married to Ashton Kutcher with her bracelet on.
Okay. So, I feel like we've talked about the evil eye before. This is protection against that. Is the simple answer. There's a lot of different talismans across all of the cultures of the world against the evil eye. The evil eye being most simply the envy and the magic that comes with that from other people's envy against you.
Yeah, the best description I've heard is that the eyes are the windows to your soul, and so people can give malice to you with a stink eye.
Yeah.
Essentially. They can. I'm staring really aggressively at Preston, trying to do something mean to him. Yeah, so people can harm you just by looking at you with bad intentions.
Yeah. And usually that's envy, but not exclusively. When people talk about it anyway, it's usually like, you've got something nice on, watch out for the evil eye. I like the penis thing that the Romans did. Avoid the evil eye by getting people to just not look at you because you're wearing a metal penis.
Oh, all right. I just feel like a hiss is really appropriate.
I feel like a lot of people are more likely to give you the stink eye with a penis than not look at you, though. Right?
I don't know if it'd be an envy, though. It'd be like a... ugh.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, the Zohar does touch on protecting yourself against the evil eye. And the origins of the red string specifically come from the tomb of Rachel, the wife of Joseph, the one who was carried off into Egypt after losing his Technicolor Dreamcoat. So it is a tradition to wrap a string 7 times around Rachel's tomb. This string is then cut into pieces and worn on the left wrist, as Kabbalah considers the left side of the body to be the receiving side. It's where your heart is.
So this became a big thing with celebrities. It was like the early 2000s. This goes back to Philip Berg and the Kabbalah Center in New York City. He became known for this tying of Kabbalah teachings into modern day struggles. And he also taught just kind of, obviously with Kabbalah underpinnings, but just general meditation and study classes that anyone can go to. After 9/11, Rabbi Berg's teaching grew more popular as secular people are trying to come to terms with this like increasingly chaotic world. And we see that a lot when people are struggling to find answers. We go to weirder sources of information. And so that's why he was very successful in the 70s and now again in the early 2000s. And he's probably doing okay right now.
Oh, yeah, he's not as poor as he was in the early 70s.
Right. So if you're any like bracket generation, you probably have no idea what we're talking about. But if you're a millennial, you'll remember that celebrities like Madonna, Mick Jagger, Demi Moore, and Ashton Kutcher, and actually very recently Ariana Grande have all been followers of Kabbalah, though I would argue that none of them are Jewish.
As far as I know, none of them are Jewish.
Yeah. So I would say they followed Kabbalah in like this sort of secular New Age way, as
Yeah.
opposed to being like, I'm going to go to the mikveh.
Because you don't have to go to the mikveh to go to the Kabbalah Center.
Right. And this has led to some backlash for Rabbi Berg from more traditional Kabbalists and Jewish people who think that Rabbi Berg has just made it trendy without requiring people to put in the work and education behind the religious tradition. It's actually very difficult to convert to Judaism. It's not an evangelical religion. They actually don't want you, generally speaking.
Not as strictly as, say, the Amish or the Hutterites, but because they're really not interested in having people join them.
I mean, I feel like the Hutterites are sort of running out of a gene pool that they might be a little...
Oh, they still cross country.
Yeah.
They cross borders to get
Yeah.
new genetic material.
And of course, there's always the like hitchhiker stories, but
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why those are hard to believe, but the stories don't stop showing up.
yeah. Even more damning for Rabbi Berg and this Kabbalah Center is the Cult Education Institute has stated that the Kabbalah Center is a cult that exploits people financially and psychology. And I just want to be clear, that's the Kabbalah Center specifically in NYC, not Kabbalah in general. So that makes a lot of sense for his
Current financial situation?
well, I was going to say like just his model,
Sure.
model of like, here's this mystic hidden tradition that I'm just going to let everyone find out about. And it's
Pay me for it.
And it's weird enough that people are like, I'm intrigued, and universal enough. Again, at some point, it becomes very similar to the Dharmic religions that people are like, oh, yeah, I get it.
Right.
And now you have a bunch of money.
Yeah. So, Kabbalah is still a controversial tradition across Jewish communities. Some say that it's ridiculous, but still worth studying the same way that Katie studies religion, as mentioned earlier. Others are more inclined to accept portions of the philosophy or theology while avoiding the depths and the labels. Ultimately, mysticism, I think, is about finding hidden truths, overcoming the parts of yourself that are undesirable. For some of us, that's harder than others. Some of us are dealing with a lot of things.
Are you okay?
Some people on our planet have a lot of work to do.
I thought you were just having a personal crisis
No.
right now on air.
No.
Okay, good.
Finding harmony with the universe is a pretty good goal. And sometimes that means doing things that look weird to outsiders. And that's mysticism.
Honestly, that's kind of any religion, doing things that look weird to outsiders.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise, would we even have a show?
Right. Oh, boy. Yeah, y'all got to keep doing your weird stuff. Y'all. I'm not from Texas. You have to keep doing your weird stuff, people, so we have more to talk about.
Yep. And we want to have you join us for the conversation on Discord. We're also on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. We've got sweet church merch on our spread shop. And if you want to support us financially and maybe even become a wizard of the Holy Watermelon, join us on Patreon.
Yeah, and share this episode with a friend. That's how we grow.
Absolutely. Share it with everybody you know. Hopefully we've helped you learn something. Help your friends.
Evangelize!
Thanks for joining us.
Peace be with you.
Enlightenment and salvation period.
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecy had fulfilled itself.
God is near.